Alright, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It is finally officially NFL draft season. The NFL season is in our rearview mirror. We're a couple weeks removed from the Super Bowl. The NFL Combine is next week, so I'm really excited to just really start diving into some NFL draft content. I've done a couple shorts along with the cut-up of the sacks taken by some of the quarterbacks in this year's draft class. If you want to check that out, if you want to use it for your evaluation purposes, I think putting those guys under a microscope in terms of how they take their sacks is going to paint a very good picture into who they are as players. But today is the video I think I really love doing the most, and it is my guys of the 2026 NFL draft. I did this video last year, and I'll link it up above if you want to see last year's group, but I love doing this list because I do my list a little bit differently. People have different criteria and different ideas of a my guys list, of their favorite players list for the NFL draft, and mine is usually rooted in my background in college football. I've evaluated a lot of these guys, whether they're in high school, whether they're in junior college, whether they're in the transfer portal, and now they've become NFL draft prospects. So it is a little mix of, sticking to my priors and trying to see these evaluations all the way through, and the fact that these guys do have legitimate next level potential. I don't want to dive into the best players and just make the best players my guys for the NFL draft. There's no fun in that. And I'll give a little bit more background and rationale as we get through each guy, but that is the general idea and the general crux of how I came up with my list. So without any further ado, here is the list of my guys for the 2026 NFL draft. All right, we're going to start with some honorable mention selections first, and the first guy up is going to be Texas Tech edge rusher David Bailey, and the reason he is an honorable mention, not full-on solidified my guy, is because he's become a pretty concrete first-round selection in this year's draft. I did want to make him an honorable mention, though, because he was someone that I brought to the table, and we were kind of looking at when he was at Stanford, when I was at Auburn. We were trying to get him to the southeast a little bit, and then I ended up putting him in a first-round mock draft I did last April. I really think I was one of the first ones to be kind of high up on him, or that high up on him, see him as that first-round pick, and I do think he's a really talented player. Is he worthy of being a top 5 pick? I think that's certainly debatable, given some of the physical traits and the athletic traits that we see on film, but the positional value of it, what he can do as a pass rusher, posting a pressure percentage of 20% or better in 3 of his 4 collegiate seasons, certainly going to be a first-round pick and someone who is worthy of being an honorable mention. All right, our next honorable mention is going to be Utah offensive tackle Spencer Fano, and again, similar to David Bailey, there's a reason why he's an honorable mention and not a my guy, right? For this exercise, we don't really want to focus on first round, maybe even top 50 guys. We want to kind of focus in on some of those unheralded players that aren't getting as much love or credit as they maybe deserve. Now, Fano is a guy who's going to make the honorable mention list because I did have him as offensive tackle going all the way back to April. I've seen him in that light, been that caliber of player. I do really believe in him as a player, much like I do David Bailey. I do think that they are very talented players. I think they're going to have sustained NFL careers. I think they're going to be quality players in the NFL. But again, with him being pretty much a top 5, top 10 pick as it stands at this current junction, I couldn't make him a top, my guy, knowing what the exercise wants to be, but he is going to get an honorable mention nod because of how I have viewed him, for such a long period of time. Moving on to our third honorable mention, we're going to go with Miami receiver CJ Daniels, who's about 6'2", 205. Now, CJ, we recruited him at Liberty. He signed with us out of high school at Liberty from Parkview High School out in Georgia, and it's been a very, very fun exercise in evaluation, just development overall, and watching him grow into the player that he's grown into, that he's become from stops at Liberty to LSU to Miami, and some of the things that he showcased at Liberty with the acrobatic receptions, the body control, the strong hands, the hand-eye coordination. It was no surprise that he was able to go on to 2 other prominent power forward programs and find some success. Now, he wasn't the star wideout at those programs. He wasn't the #1 guy, but he did find a role and did prove capable of producing and being that caliber of player. And that's why I think he's going to be able to find some sort of niche or role in the NFL. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. This guy has all kinds of traits that do show up and do play on Sundays. So it really wouldn't surprise me if he became some sort of contributor, some sort of effective role player in the NFL. I think he's got those abilities, like I said, hand-eye coordination, the body control, the ability to finish. Obviously, we know about the catch that he had against Notre Dame early on in the season. I think this guy is a really talented player. He's a little bit older, which is going to be one of the bigger knocks on him. He's not the fastest, most explosive of kind of the bigger body bunch in this class, but just the ability to finish through the contested catch point is a major, major strength of his. His experience both in the slot and along the perimeter are going to make a team very happy on day 3 of the draft. All right, we're going deeper in the bag with this next honorable mention. It's going to be Ole Miss defensive back Kapena Gushiken. Really, really talented player. I first stumbled across Kapena and evaluated him coming out of JUCO when I was at the University of Houston. From Saddleback College, was a really, really fun player, really twitchy player. That's what you're going to see in a lot of these clips. He is twitched up. He's aggressive. I think because of those traits, the ability to kind of shadow different types of routes, the ability to take on contact, the desire to take on contact for being a smaller body, he's going to be around the 5'10" range, just sub 200-pound guy. I am very, very impressed with the player that he's becoming and it's no wonder that after starting his career at Washington State that he was able to move on to Ole Miss and become, the quality of player that they wanted, a productive player for them. And again, some of that twitch and reactive quickness we're going to see here against Dante Moore when he was at UCLA. He's going to intercept this pass and run it all the way back for a touchdown. But again, range, he has speed, he has ability to shadow underneath routes, kind of mirror and match ball carriers. He's not shy, he's not afraid to come down, put his face on you, take on contact, meet running backs in the hole. So I just think that this guy has a skill set that can find a way onto an NFL roster. Again, he's likely not a guy as it stands today who's going to get drafted, but I do think with his skill set, it would not surprise me to see him carve out a role in the league, whether it be on special teams, if not develop, he can do some sort of reserve nickel. All right, another underrated defender that I'm excited about is Alabama linebacker Justin Jefferson. That's right, we have another Justin Jefferson potentially entering the NFL. And I first stumbled across this film when he was in JUCO a couple years ago, and I was at the University of Houston, and I was blown away by this dude's film. I had to tweet it back out, kind of revisit it on the timeline a couple weeks ago because it was just insane. He was super explosive across all planes in all directions, moving forwards, moving backwards, moving laterally, just creating a ton of range. And it's really no surprise that he not only ended up at Alabama, but became a productive starter for them. I think he has the twitch, the suddenness, the short area explosiveness that are ready and calibrated for NFL duties, both from a coverage standpoint, mirror matching running backs, handling the athleticism at that position, on top of possessing the speed, the long range ability to work across lateral planes, to move sideline to sideline, and handle special teams duties. He had over 300 career special team snaps at Alabama. And I think that there's a real opportunity for him to carve out a role there early on in his career as likely a mid to late day 3 guy. How he does at the combine, both from a measurement and from a testing standpoint, is going to be huge for him. But I do think as it stands right now, he is a viable NFL draft prospect. All right, our last honorable mention of the bunch is going to be NC State tight end Justin Joly. This is a kid that we actually were his second offer out of the transfer portal when he left UConn a couple years ago. And one of the things that really stands out about him is just the growth and development of his body as a player physically. He was about 230, 235 when he was at UConn. In his most recent season at NC State, he was upwards of 255, 260. You can really see it on film. He really was a high school receiver early on, got to UConn, really was more of a pass catching tight end, more of that H, developed his body, added the weight once he got to the power 4 level, preparing himself to handle those run game duties, mix things up inside the box, really make an impact in the run game as a blocker. Not only that, but his technique improved. I think he found different ways to solve problems in the run game, was able to rely on and really develop that technique as he got bigger and stronger, more powerful, more explosiveness that was at his disposal because of that added weight. And it's really more of an honorable mention because I don't want to have so many tight ends on this list, and I do think that those that I'm featuring are really more truly of my guys, but I did have the opportunity to recruit and offer Joly. Like I said, we were his second offer out of the transfer portal, only behind Tennessee. It's really no surprise to see him go on to NC State, have success at the power 4 level, now become a legitimate NFL prospect who's going to get drafted this year. All right, we're going to kick things off with UTSA running back Robert Henry Jr., and I'm really excited to start with his film because he is lightning in a bottle. Now, if you followed college football closely this year, this is a name you probably heard of because in week 1 in their first game of the year against Texas A&M, he ran for 177 yards and 2 touchdowns on 16 carries. He averaged 11 yards a carry this game, and it kicked off a stretch of the first 4 games in which he ran for over 140 yards in each of those games and scored 2 rushing touchdowns in 3 of the 4. He is going to be kind of that quote-unquote undersized back, even though he's not necessarily undersized as a whole. He's going to come in probably around the 5'8", 5'9" mark, but he was listed at 205 this year, so he's not one of those guys who's 5'8", 5'9", 180, 185 pounds. You're not really going to have the same kinds of concerns regarding durability, tread on the tire, things of that nature as you would if he were in that lower weight range. And again, we're going to see these long plays, these explosive runs that he had against A&M to start the year. He was among the leaders in all of college football with 4.22 yards after contact per rushing attempt. The burst through the first 2 levels that grows into the long speed. You're going to see guys, all kinds of different running backs, and this position is so unique because you get so many different types of body types, so many different types of skill sets in different body types. You're going to see guys that have burst, but maybe it doesn't grow into the long speed, and that's what I talk about. The better ones usually have both, and again, it's like most things. They have both, and it grows and escalates for the better prospect they are, the better levels at which they can do it, and he has both. Again, he is on the shorter side, so that's going to be a detractor. I don't really necessarily see it as a deal breaker by any means. It is going to be, one of the elements that is going to push him down into that day 3 range. But again, he only had 153 carries last year, and on those carries, he forced 33 missed tackles and had 16 runs of 15 yards or more. So I can't say it enough times in terms of lightning in a bottle and the explosiveness. He has those traits in spades, and I think the fact that he does run tough, he does a lot of work between the tackles. That's the other kind of hallmark trade with him, is despite being that smaller, that shorter back, he is certainly not afraid. And not only not afraid, he has the talent to stick it up in between the tackles, attack the A and B gaps, fight through contact. So again, I think this dude is a really, really talented running back. He's a guy that I first stumbled across when he was at Jones County Community College out in Mississippi a couple years ago, and I was at Houston, and I was just blown away. And it's kind of funny to see him now because he was a lot like he was even at JUCO. He's just been able to translate it to a better level of competition. So I'm firmly stamping Robert Henry Jr. as my guy for the 2026 NFL draft, a guy who's going to get drafted, and a guy who I do think is going to be able to sustain a career on special teams and as a reserve running back. All right, now we're going to get into this group of tight ends, and I'm really, really excited to dive into these tight ends for a variety of reasons. During my one season at Auburn, I was responsible for kind of helping oversee and manage the quarterback recruiting and the tight end recruiting, and that meant evaluating high school tight ends, junior college tight ends, and evaluating college tight ends in case they were to enter the portal. We would have the evaluation done. We would have our minds made up to attack them right away. And one of the things I did when I first got there was I went through the entire SEC in 2023 and evaluated all the positions, evaluated, the players, kind of the two deep, the players who played the most. Oscar Delp was the second highest graded tight end for me, only behind Brock Bowers. So he was above Mason Taylor, above some of those other guys that I really, really think were good players, but I felt so highly and felt so convicted about Oscar Delp. And jumping ahead to the 2024 season, I pretty much had him as one of the top tight ends in the country. Now, I didn't evaluate every single tight end in the country because there were some guys who we knew that were going to enter the NFL draft and weren't going to come back for another year and things of that nature. But as you can see with where he stacks up against some of these other names, this is how highly I thought of him, and I do feel like he has become that caliber of player. I mocked him in the second round to the Eagles last month in my 7th-round mock draft. Will they take him that early? I don't know, but I do think that he is worthy of being a top 60 pick, no doubt about it. Now, whether you watch Georgia or not, anytime you're going to get to his film, you are going to notice that he just wasn't a huge factor in their passing game, but it certainly wasn't for a lack of effort or ability. We know Gunnar Stockton is a little bit limited as a quarterback. They did have Zachariah Branch and some other guys, and the structure of their offense just isn't really pass first anyway. So you have to wade through some of that, but once you turn on the film, and again, once you actually watch the film, what are your eyes telling you? You can see that he can run. He has the acceleration, he has the ball skills, he has some route chop. Again, when you're evaluating tight ends in this day and age, it's become sexy, it's become the prominent thing to notice who they are as pass catchers. But when you get in the NFL, when you're watching NFL football, when you're watching NFL film every week, you still have to be a reliable run blocker in the NFL. You can't just rely on being a pass catcher, being a guy who makes his impact in the passing game before he can do stuff in the running game, in the box, hold up in pass protection. It's a different game on Sundays than it is on Saturdays. He's a listed 6'5", 245, so how he measures in the combine is definitely going to be something worth tracking. I do think he has a little bit of a length issue that shows up in the run game, but he's a competitor and a fighter when it comes to blocking, man. Whether it's pass pro, whether it's in the run game, he's going to compete. He has the want to, he has a desire to mix it up. Now, if he can hold and play at 250, I think that's going to be extremely advantageous for what he's going to want to do in the run game at the next level, because base blocking and digging out defensive ends on Sundays is just a totally different ball game. But again, we've seen him make blocks on the move. He's blocked different types of athletes at different types of levels. And so again, ultimately just comes back to the fact that I think he's one of the most well-rounded tight end prospects in this entire class. All right, next tight end is Stanford Sam Roush. And again, this dude is one of the most well-rounded pro-ready tight ends in this entire class. I don't know how he's not getting talked about more, especially with the Senior Bowl performance that he had and the fact that his pass catching numbers have gotten better every year of his career. He finished 2025 with 49 receptions for 545 yards and 2 touchdowns. Stanford's quarterback play was also not very good this year, so it's really, really impressive. Career numbers of 119 receptions for just over 1,200 yards and 4 touchdowns. Watching him run routes, it's very evident the type of athlete that he is, with his ability to efficiently and effectively, get out of breaks, to sell vertically. He's a quality route runner to the level that it's going to scale to NFL success as that route runner, where he can kind of find success through different routes, attacking zones, working laterally, working the intermediate verticals, working the seams, utilizing different stems. And the craziest part of it all is that's not even the strength of his. That's not what really sets him apart from these other tight ends. He is truly one of the best run blocking tight ends in all of America. Again, 6'5", 260 pounds. He really uses that to his advantage to get up underneath defensive ends, drive them out, base block them, dig them out, create lanes in wide zone, but work his balance, his ability to position and leverage himself in the changing faces of defenses. When he's working from the first and the second level, trying to seal and reach and sustain blocking against smaller players, linebackers, DBs. Again, he's 260 pounds. So once he gets past that first level, he's given up, 20, 30, 40 pounds on some of these dudes. And his ability to react athletically and seal off lanes and create opportunities as runs widen and expand is very, very impressive. And that's just the approach and the engagement part of who he is as a blocker. Once he is engaged, there is a finishing element. He wants to put dudes in the dirt, finish blocks. He should absolutely be a day 2 pick. And that's for my kind of connection and why he's one of my guys. It goes back to my time at Auburn. When I was evaluating him in the 2024 season, it was so evident and so clear that he was one of the most unheralded tight ends in the entire country. We definitely wanted to make him an Auburn Tiger, and although we couldn't get it done, it's no surprise to see him stack that 2025 season on top of that 2024 season. And again, if you go through my timeline, if you pull up my Twitter account and search Roush or tight ends or whatever, you'll see me talking about Sam Roush. I've been talking about him for a year and a half now, honestly, 2 years now. I do believe in who he is. I think he's going to be a very, very good pro. All right, our third and final tight end of the group is going to be Utah's Dallen Bentley, a pretty unknown name, or was a pretty unknown name when I was first making this video. I had him as a top 100 pick. As a matter of fact, he was the 100th overall pick in my 7-round mock draft I did about 3 or 4 weeks ago. He's since been kind of making the rounds on social media, and for me, it goes back to who he was at Snow Community College a couple years ago. He was a guy that I really wanted us to take it at Houston when he was coming out in the spring. So he was actually like a late ad for Utah, which is pretty intriguing and pretty interesting how he's developed into quite a good player for them. He's about 6'4", 260. Entering this 2025 season, he didn't have any more than 200 career receiving yards, but he exploded this past year with 48 receptions for over 600 yards. He ranked at or near the top in receptions and yards and touchdowns for all FBS tight ends. He really burst onto the scene and showcased who he was as a pass catcher. And honestly, that production, that level of who he is as a pass catcher at that weight, it is very reminiscent and feels very similar to Roush. Now, he's not the same type of blocker as Roush, and I think that's ultimately what really should and probably will push him down below a guy like Sam Roush, but even then, he can do it. Just a little bit frustrating to watch the inconsistencies, right? Being quicker with his hands as a blocker, right? Being able to fit and follow through. Too often, he's more of a contact catcher than he is the initiator and kind of the aggressor in the run game, and that's what gets most frustrating for a guy who is going to be, 250 plus pounds. You would like to see a little bit more dominance and kind of, brute force and strength being exhibited. Some people moving capabilities that you do see in some of these other tight ends. Like even Delp is a better blocker relative to who he is physically in terms of what kind of mass and his body composition. Now that doesn't make him unlike or dissimilar a lot of college tight ends and really even just a lot of college blockers in general. But again, when you're talking about taking a guy, in the top 100 picks or being, kind of a late day 2 or even early day 3 kind of guy, those are the deficiencies that you don't want to see at a detrimental level. And I'm not saying they are for him, but they're a little bit too close. They blur the line a little bit too much. I think for most NFL teams now, again, like I said, I had him as a 100th overall pick. I do believe he's a top 100 player right on the edge, a little bit on the fringe. And so it really would surprise me if he did fall into the early portions of day 3. But who he is as a pass catcher, again, I know we're not trying to overvalue that, but it is really, really good. It is very impressive. And we saw that the breakout year, he's a little bit older. And again, the two-way ability. I know we talked about the deficiencies as a blocker, but the want to, the desire, the size, right? Having the size and the mass is really a great jumping off point when you're trying to project these tight ends to NFL blocking duties, whether you're in pass pro, whether you're in the run game. Ultimately, again, these are all the reasons why I do believe that Dallen Bentley is going to find success as an NFL tight end, and again, why he is one of my guys for this year. All right, we're going to move on to the big boys up front, starting with Oregon guard Emmanuel Pregnon, who I know bucks the trend of the top 50 player that we were trying to avoid and we don't really want to focus on, but for me, it goes further back. He was at Wyoming and he was transferring the first go around. At the time, I was manning the transfer portal and kind of overseeing that process for us, and I thought this dude was a slam dunk power forward player. He ended up going to USC, had a good run there. When he was leaving the portal again to go to Oregon, at the time, as you can see, I thought he was the best player in the portal. I saw him as a day 3 player at the time, and this is kind of the beauty of evaluation and player development as a whole, is in his final year at Oregon, he has now become, like I said, that pretty concrete, confident top 50 pick. I've mocked him in the first round in my mock drafts a couple weeks ago. Again, this one I did towards the end of January. I had him as a first round pick. I see him as that caliber of player. He's listed at 6'5", 318, has tons and tons of experience. The way he's built, the body type, the body composition, the frame, he looks the part of an NFL guard, a starting NFL guard. And he uses that to get downhill, be a people mover, playing with that kind of broad base and the power, really the proportionate power, the power up top and the power below that he marries and really utilizes to not only engage, but to sustain and finish, right? Those are the 3 phases of the block: the engagement, the sustainment, and the finish. And he does all 3 phases very, very well. Now, there is a chance he isn't a first round pick, and I think, again, that really results in just the levels of inconsistency. And you really saw it in the game against Texas Tech in his battles with Lee Hunter. It was very up and down, the inconsistencies. It's frustrating to watch him occasionally be kind of the second to contact. He's not always the initiator. Those types of inconsistencies are going to be the thing that I think would keep him out of the first round. But the framing of that changes too, because we know that offensive line is a position where you are going to lose. It's like every other position in the game. You're going to have bad reps, you're going to have losses, you're going to lose early. But with offensive line play, we know just how valuable recovery is, the ability to recover, to re-engage. Recovery is kind of a broad term. Obviously, it's relative to what's happening in the environment around you, but the ability to recover regardless of how you do it is an extremely valuable trait, and he does that well, which again is why he, even with his inconsistencies and his struggles and the weaknesses in his game, on top of the athleticism at his disposal, right? So when we talk talk about kind of being this downhill man and gap scheme blocker with the brute strength, the physicality, the size. Those are the traits that are going to funnel into that type of successful player. But he also has that umbrella term of athleticism, right? Foot speed, lateral quickness, the reactive quickness, and a lot of that is accentuated by the base that he plays with. The base that can generate force and power and movement, in addition to creating the range to pick up things working laterally, twists and blitzes, all type of games up front, working to the second level, getting out to the perimeter. So again, all of those things are what make him, in my opinion, a plug and play starter at the next level. And more specifically, a guy I'm probably looking at if I'm Houston or New England. All right, sticking along the offensive line, but kicking out to tackle now, we might have my favorite guy of the bunch. It's really hard to pick one, rank one above all the rest of these guys, but Iheanachor might be my favorite guy of the entire bunch. The Arizona State offensive tackle, again, much like Pregnon, really not a non-top 50 player at this rate. As it stands today, would not be surprised in the least if he ended up becoming a first-round pick. And he's got a very, very cool story. And the thing about me and my connection with him is I got a chance to learn a little bit about it when I was at the University of Houston, and he was at East Los Angeles College, ELAC, the junior college out in SoCal. He and his family moved from Nigeria when Max was around 13 when he was a teenager, grew up playing soccer, did not play any organized football, didn't start playing football until he got to ELAC. And the thing with him is he was playing basketball, and his basketball coaches put him on to the football coaches when he got to ELAC. And so he got to ELAC redshirted. In his second year there, he was playing. Not only was he playing, he was a full-time starter. So he got to Arizona State with quite literally just one season of playing real organized game activity, real organized game time under his belt. Now, he is obviously very clearly a very fascinating prospect, very fascinating individual. His first year at ASU in 2023, he ends up playing in 6 games, starts 5 of them, becomes the full-time starter in 2024 at right tackle, and then obviously this past year in 2025, great season, goes to the Senior Bowl, builds on his season. So again, Big Max, he's like a ball of clay. So I'm really excited for his future. Obviously, I've had the chance to build a little bit of a personal relationship with him through the recruiting process. And the coolest thing about it is you saw the progression, and it really helped reshape my perspective and kind of my evaluation of him, because the first time I'm watching him through his junior college film, first couple games, and I thought, okay, he's a good player, not a guy that seems worthy of an offer, or not definitively worthy of an offer, seeing what we're seeing on film and things of that nature. And this is where, the background work, the context is so important, because the more I'm talking to him and the more I'm learning about him, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's doing this in his first year of actually playing the sport. And you can see the size, you can see the body composition, you can see the way that he's built. And it's really just no surprise to see the player that he's become now, and see, the dimensions and the way he moves and the footwork, again, being a soccer and a basketball player, growing up the multi-sport background, the length that he has, again, the way he's built. I've made a tweet about this, the way that his calves look. That's usually a good indicator of the type of athlete someone is. And man, just a really, really cool story. As for the film, he's a guy that looks like they were taught to be more of or instructed to be more of two-hand punchers last year, which, is not really the most efficient way to punch and strike. If you're watching some of the top offensive tackles in this year's class, they're usually using that long and strong, outside hand, that outside jab that really helps take away space, disrupt speed and timing. Obviously, one arm is longer than two. Being a two-hand puncher, especially when rushers get wide, you really saw some of those reps at the Senior Bowl where he got beat. A lot of it was just not necessarily getting beat by speed, but just kind of his approach and prep to speed. Now, obviously, one-on-ones are hardly the measuring stick you want to use when you're evaluating a player, but they certainly put these guys under a microscope for a reason. It just kind of provides more context into what you're seeing. He also allowed one of the lowest pressure rates when you're kind of going through and filtering out, allowing for, more true dropbacks. All of this being said, you want to see it in action, turn on the Texas Tech game. Watch him block Romello Height. Watch him block David Bailey. He had some very, very encouraging reps that really highlight, the type of NFL player he's going to be. All right, we're going to finish off things on the offensive side of the ball with this mammoth offensive lineman, Markel, offensive tackle at Miami. He's about 6'9", 350 pounds, give or take. He's going to be in kind of that DeJuan Jones territory. That's going to be a name you're going to hear a lot referenced towards him and kind of compared towards him, or comped to rather. And the origins for his inclusion on this list go back to when he was playing at Hines Community College in Mississippi a few years back. We were recruiting him out of there when I was at Houston, and it was kind of funny watching his film just to see how big he is. And even now, he's going to be one of, if not the biggest players in this entire NFL draft. And it's been a ton of fun watching him develop, similar to Robert Henry, and you're seeing a lot of the same player in terms of, in the context of really their strengths. But their strengths obviously have been accentuated because they've had to get better while facing better competition, right? The improvements, the talent, the skill, they've all risen commensurate with the talent that they're playing against. And he's always been big. He's always been a large human. He's always going to be a big human. And I think that's obviously what's really enticing beyond just that, but in conjunction with the way that he moves at that size, right? I think that was a lot of the appeal and attraction to DeJuan Jones, as we mentioned, just the functional movement at that size, right? When you're watching these guys, you don't watch a Markel through the same prism as his teammate on the other side, Francis Mauigoa, because they're totally different body types, different sizes, compositions, all that. So when you're watching a guy like Markel, it's all in the context of how well they move relative to their size. And you're seeing these clips right now. You're seeing him get out of his stance, get to the perimeter, get to space. Not only do those things functionally, but line guys up, right? You're going to see that clip against D'Angelo Pons, and I get it. There is definitely a 10 or 11 inch height difference between those two guys, so I'm not really crowning him because of that. But again, the ability to line him up and strike him and engage is very, very impressive, on top of, like we've said multiple times already, just what you've seen in his movement skills and his functional athleticism at that size. And the other thing that really kind of fires me up about who he is as a player is the fact that he went to the Senior Bowl about a week after the season ended. So he just got done playing a 16-game season, played a super competitive game against a very tough Indiana team again to cap off the 16th game of the season, and about a week later he's back in pads competing at the Senior Bowl. I think that's a tremendous testament to kind of his football character, who he is as a player, the competitiveness, right? All those buzzwords that we use that we can't really quantify and that we as the public have very little true knowledge or understanding of, but I do think it paints that picture. And again, I'm really fired up to include him in this My Guys list. All right, we're going to move over to the defensive side of the ball now. We don't have any defensive linemen featured in this year's group like we did last year, and it's not necessarily for a lack of talent. I mean, obviously we know the edge group is a little underwhelming past the top guys. We did include David Bailey. I do think there are a handful of good interior guys, you know, 3 techs, nose tackles. It seems pretty nose tackle heavy over true 3 tech heavy, but even then there weren't a lot of guys going back that I felt, you know, a ton of conviction about. So we're going to jump to the linebackers, and we're going to start with Oregon's Bryce Boettcher. This dude right here is a very, very fun prospect, and he was someone I mocked to the Cardinals in their 7th-round mock draft last month. I've been pretty vocal about him on social media and things of that nature because I do really think he's a talented player. And what's most interesting about him, honestly, is not only was he on Oregon's baseball team, but he was an all Pac-12 honorable mention, on top of the fact he was drafted in the 2024 MLB draft by the Houston Astros, and he was like a 13th round pick. We're not talking like rounds 25 and beyond. You know, the MLB draft is a very long draft, so you know, he wasn't like a primary or priority draft pick, but you know, he was a guy that was kind of like a middle of the draft MLB draft pick. So again, I think that showcases not only who he is obviously as a baseball player, but who he is as an athlete as well. He's gonna come in probably on the quote-unquote shorter side, you know, he's gonna be around a footer, and he's gonna be 225, 230, give or take. You know, that's what he's listed at. Obviously these combine weights can be a little inflated, but again, that's what you're gonna see him listed at, somewhere around the 6 foot range, around the 225 to 230 range. Now the average-ish size is really kind of a detractor in its own right, but you couple that with the fact that, you know, who he is kind of more of as a reactive athlete, especially at that position. We know how important that is. Not necessarily an athlete as a whole, a functional athlete. Being able to see it and trigger in an explosive manner, that's what kind of keeps him from being one of those upper echelon linebacker prospects. And truthfully, that's going to be something I think that will probably keep him from being, you know, a full-time starter at the NFL level. But nonetheless, I love his film. I do think he has more than sufficient anticipatory reactions. I do think that he can read it and feel it. That was certainly a stock booster for him, on top of the fact that he's going to be a 4-core special teams guy. But I do think that he's going to be able to sustain a lengthy NFL career and be a guy with the potential to outplay his draft position. All right, we're going to stick here at linebacker. And again, if you've been following kind of this NFL draft process, you know this linebacker group is really deep. Linebacker, safety, tight end, they're going to produce multiple starters. I feel very confident that those 3 position groups are filled with players from top to bottom. You know, it's not necessarily a top heavy group, right? They do have the top end coming behind it that you're going to be able to find a ton of quality starters on day 3. And Jaden Duggar from Louisiana, I think he has real potential to be one of those guys. Now, he was kind of an unheralded name for the most part throughout the season. I kind of caught wind of him in December, and I thought we should really pursue him for the agency. He's a listed 6'5", 250 pounds. He started his career at Georgetown. He kind of operated more like a nickel Sam more than he did kind of a true in the box linebacker, where he would man the slot, be in the box, kick down to the edge and stand up and rush the passer, a movable chess piece, if you will. Would line up as a safety at times. You know, when he got to Louisiana, he grew into that true linebacker, and in 2025, in his final year, Louisiana, he was primarily to the box. He was doing the vast majority of his work there. Now, he also enters his NFL draft process with nearly 400 career special team snaps, with snaps on both kick units, on both punt units, on field goal and PAT. So he's going to automatically enter the NFL with the opportunity to make a roster, make an impact on special teams. Now, I say make a roster. Is he going to get drafted? He seems like kind of a fringe draftable guy, even with the week that he had at the Shrine game. But again, I think there's real potential for him to become a valuable role player in the NFL. Okay, our last linebacker of the bunch is a really fun one, and it's Jack Kelly out of BYU. And we're going to start with his Weber State highlights because I have a pretty interesting anecdote about him. So when he hit the portal from Weber State, I was at Houston again, kind of overseeing the transfer portal process and all that. I got a chance to talk to him on the phone, and we were just kind of chopping it up. Obviously, his film was incredible. You can kind of see where I had him ranked in this portal cycle amongst these, you know, transfer defensive linemen. We were just talking, and I was like, man, you can really rush the pass. You're really good at what you do coming off the edge, all this stuff. And he was like, I actually want to play linebacker at my next spot, which I thought was interesting because he played some linebacker linebacker at Weber State, primarily in 2023, his second year there, or his third year there, I believe, but his second year playing. But again, he kind of switched roles and responsibilities between 2022, and he was pretty much a full-time edge guy in 2023 when he became more of a full-time starter. He played more games, logged more snaps, and it was more off the ball, much more in the box. Now, he still had a pretty healthy share of snaps along the defensive line, as that edge guy, but he was a primary box player in 2023. And I just thought it was interesting because I was like, man, you can really rush the passer. I think, you're going to have the opportunity to make a lot of money. Even though he was a little undersized at the time, you can kind of see even now if you go back and watch his Weber State film and you watch the BYU stuff, you could tell there's a little bit more mass to him. But again, I was like, man, even if you added that mass and you came rushing the passer, like, you might be able to make, something of it. And we know how valuable pass rushers are. Not to say I didn't think he couldn't be a box player or be a true power forward linebacker. I'm really not surprised to see the player who's become, knowing who he is, the way he's wired. You can see some of the football character and those things on film, the way he plays, the energy, the motor, the relentless pursuit. That's why I had to include him in this list of my guys, because he was a ton of fun at Weber State. We were highly interested in him. I remember our defensive line coach loving his film, saying he was one of the best pure pass rushers in the portal at the time, and just seeing the player he's become. Again, we talk about versatility and talk about how deep this linebacker class is, and he's certainly another name to know. And again, another guy with a ton of special teams experience. Now, granted, he's played a little bit more than some of these other guys, but over 400 special team snaps. He's about a listed 6'1", 245. So again, you can kind of see why making that permanent move to linebacker was probably the better move in terms of long-term scalability. Those aren't really edge rusher dimensions, but again, he is going to be a core 4 special teamer. He's got good linebacker film. I firmly believe he's going to be a day 3 guy who makes his mark on special teams and finds a way to stick as a linebacker, primarily with third down value, because we know he can rush the passer. He's got some athletic ability to cover, but again, that ability to rush the passer, I think, in conjunction with the special team stuff we've talked about, is definitely going to help him make an impact in the NFL. All right, we are going to wrap up the 2026 version of my guys for the NFL draft with USC safety Bishop Fitzgerald. That's right, we're going back to the safety well. Again, like we just talked about with linebacker, this is a deep safety class. There are a ton of not just names, but actual good players. I think what gets lost in translation sometimes is we conflate names, notable names that we know as college football fans. We conflate them with legitimate NFL draft prospects. And I know I've been guilty of doing that myself, trying to eliminate that bias, tear the veil a little bit in terms of moving on from being a fan of a player, knowing who he is, knowing the name, versus, okay, when we're settling down to look at these guys as who they are as NFL draft prospects, can we be realistic? This isn't some sort of listicle. I'm not going to spew a ton of superlatives. It's a ton of guys that I have years of knowledge of, years of history of evaluating at multiple levels. I've seen the work they've put in to become the types of players they are at each level. And yeah, I've admitted that they're probably not going to be the top NFL players. Not all of them are going to be drafted for that matter. But at the end of the day, like, I believe in who they are, and I believe in their ability to make a contribution relative to how they enter the league. I say all that to say we're going to wrap up with Bishop Fitzgerald, who is, again, a talented member of this deeper safety class. He's a guy for me that we knew a little bit about when I was at Liberty back in 2021 when he was at Garfield High School out in Virginia. Being the in-state program, we always knew about the productive and talented players. Now, he ended up going the JUCO route, went to Coffeyville Community College out in Kansas, did his thing there, transferred from there to NC State, where he became an all-ACC honorable mention, decided to hop in the portal for his final year, ended up at USC this past year, again, had a great year, had 5 interceptions, despite missing multiple games. And not only that, in his 3 years of Power 4 football, his interception totals increased year over year. His first year at NC State in 2023, he had 2. Following year, he had 3, and obviously this past year, he had 5. So this guy takes the ball away. He has 14 career PBUs, and this is what we're talking about. And again, you watch some of these interceptions, I get it. Some of them were gift wrapped to him, but again, you still have to make a play on the ball when it comes your way. And that's what happens. He finds a way to make a play, and he makes plays on his own. He is a play creator on his own, which to me is a huge part of being a safety, especially in today's NFL. Now, for us, and for me, not only knowing him a little bit at Liberty, he was also a guy who was highly on our radar when he was at Coffeyville. He was a tremendous JUCO player. I really thought he was going to come in and be able to help us. You could see pretty clearly and pretty early on the type of player he was, even at the JUCO level. Now, he's not dissimilar from most of these players, a lot of these players, where how they do at the combine is going to be either boost or detractor for their draft status, right or wrong. I don't necessarily think either one should sway your opinion on a player heavily one direction or the other. If anything, they should confirm or support what you're seeing, and if not, you should go back and reevaluate. Maybe you missed something, maybe you misjudged something. But either way, he's going to come in around the 6 foot mark, might be a shade under 6 foot, around the 195, 200 pound range, maybe even 205. So we'll say 195 to 205 range. If he can come in with those measurements and test well, I do firmly believe he's going to cement himself as a top 100 pick. He's been a boundary safety, he's been a field safety, he's primarily a field safety, again, with kind of the range and the ball skills at his disposal. I think he is mostly a reliable run defender, sufficient run defender. I wouldn't classify him as anything higher or lower than that. He's had notable ups and downs, you know, been notably more inconsistent than some of those other guys, especially in this draft class. He's looked comfortable handling duties in the box, but again, give him space. Let him roam, let him range, let him play top down and kind of come, you know, be that star on the Christmas tree. And again, 291 career special team snaps, so there's going to be an obvious opportunity for him to make an impact there. So watch for Bishop Fitzgerald closely at the combine. Like I said, if he tests well, I know well is a relative term, but if he has the testing day, the measurements, all that, the packaging of those two, if it is one of the better in that class, I do think it is going to cement himself as a top 100 pick.